professionally, which is why I haven't been on here doing this. Also, the format was getting a little out of hand. I was having to do a lot of editing to the audio afterwards, so I'm trying something new here. I'm going to try to do screen recordings. That way I accomplish two goals, actually. One is that I'm no longer going to run out of space. My hosting site for the audio for my podcast was getting full, and then I'd have to start paying for it, which I don't really want to. By doing screen recordings and posting everything onto YouTube instead, I have pretty much unlimited space. And then secondly, it's going to reduce my editing time, because rather than having to edit in audio from other videos that I find online, I can just play the videos for you right here on my screen. Here, I'm going to have to raise the volume so that you'll hear the videos that are playing on my screen. So if I have audio that I wanted to edit in, I can just show it to you. The added bonus also of having the stories that I'm talking about on the screen are that I don't have to print them out and highlight them and read them and have the page turning sound on the microphone, or lose my spot on the paper as I'm reading. You can also see what I'm reading. You can see the source, so I no longer am going to have to necessarily quote all my sources in the video or in the description of the podcast. You'll just be able to see it. Downsides. You're going to see just how shitty and slow my internet is, first of all. Second of all, you're probably going to get a little whirring sound in the background, which is my computer trying to keep up with all the tabs that I have open. But you'll basically see in real time me being able to switch tabs here, so you'll be able to see everything I'm working on. So why have I been gone for so long? Okay. I think I left you guys after my dad had his heart attack. A lot has happened since then. He's back to work. He's doing okay. But my work has been very busy and very stressful lately. I work in finance. I work in retirement, as any listener of this podcast knows from the beginning. We were running into some pretty heavy tax deadlines, some audit deadlines for 401k plans, and obviously, my work is more important than this, because that's what I do to make my livelihood. So my work has been pretty straight out. I've been staying late. I've been, I just haven't had time to do prep for the show. I haven't had time to actually read stories and prep, but that's dying down, so I'm going to have more time to do this. Also, cutting down on the edit time by doing a screen recording is going to help make it easier to do this, which then is going to make it easier for me to do this more regularly and get it posted. Secondly, I have 2 kids, and it's summertime now. And so I live in Gloucester, Massachusetts, which means at any given time, if it's sunny, I'm at the beach. My kids stay up later during the summer too, so I don't have as much time at night to work on this kind of stuff. And plus, my wife and I like to spend more time together during the summer, so my nights are not as free during the summer. And another thing related to that too, or not related to that, but related to work, is that I've been selected for a leadership development program at my work, which is a pretty big honor, and I appreciate it. But it's sucking up a lot of my extra time. So between all of those things, between family, work, extended family, my father, my own health issues, I've been actually consulting with my doctor about my heart, because apparently heart disease runs in my family. It's just been a lot. And so, ancillary things like this have not taken precedent. But I'm trying to get back into it, because it's something that I like to do, and I think that it's healthy for me to get this stuff out. So just an explanation of where I've been and why I'm taking this in a new direction, more moving from audio only to doing video. I'm not doing a full video podcast, as in you're not going to be looking at my face, which is good for you. I mean, I would not want to subject you to that on a regular basis. But I'm also going to move from doing it several times a week, which I was doing before, to probably once a week. I'm hoping to do an average episode maybe every Wednesday. And then I'm also going to be introducing something else, which I'll probably be uploading alongside this video, called and this is the working title, I may change it, but as of right now, I'm calling it the Sunday Morning Reason Roundup. As you know, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God. I don't go to church. And many of you, I assume, who are listening probably are the same way. And so my thought is to post things on Sunday mornings. Obviously, this won't be published on a Sunday morning, but publishing something on a Sunday morning, just reviewing some sort of religious bullshit or even irrational bullshit that happened during the week. And the Reason Roundup isn't going to be necessarily about attacking religion only. It's also going to be about identifying the enemies of reason everywhere. So this is going to span climate denial, evolution denial, vaccine denial, medical science denial, and obviously religious bullshit, spiritualism, New Ageism, all that kind of jazz. So it's going to span everything. So the Reason Roundup's going to be coming. I'm going to be doing that hopefully every Sunday and uploading that on Sunday mornings, and it's just going to be a review of the week. Sometimes I'll do one story, sometimes I'll do several, but we'll see how it goes. I'm going to have to do my research and pull these things out, so it's going to be fun, and that's going to be separate from my normal podcast. My normal podcast is going to continue in the same vein as I have been doing, with many different news stories and my take on those news stories. Tonight, however, is going to be sort of focused on one topic, because I think it's important enough to focus on in one individual episode. So putting all that introductory stuff aside, I want to get into the story that I'm going to talk about tonight. Obviously, since I'm only focusing on one story, or actually not necessarily one story, but they're all connected, and you'll see what I'm talking about in a minute. And I think you can kind of already tell based on the story I have in the background here. This obviously won't be as long as a normal podcast. It won't be an hour, certainly. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe half an hour. We'll see how long I go. But I really wanted to touch on what happened this week. And rest assured, I will get back into politics. A lot has happened since I last had my podcast. The GOP is completely imploded. I will do a full postmortem on that. Bernie Sanders is more or less, for better or worse, out of the race. Hillary Clinton was not indicted, all of that. We'll get to that. But given what's transpired over the last week, I thought it would be appropriate to give a full episode to this topic. So I'm sure you all know by now, obviously, there was the sniper shooting in Dallas, where 5 police officers were targeted. That's horrific. That's horrific, I should say. Horrible, unacceptable. No police officer who is doing his job correctly, no police officer deserves to die, period. No person without due process deserves to die. These police officers that were shot were protecting protesters, and in doing so, they were shot. They were targeted by the shooter, specifically because they were police officers, and specifically because they were white, by his own admission. And that's horrendous. But I also want to give the backstory. Obviously, most people already know this, but we're just going to go through, and I'm gonna give you my take on everything. So, first we had the shooting of this man. Right here, you'll see his picture. His name's Alton Sterling. This is his picture right here. My cursor's over his face. He was shot by 2 police officers. I think only one was actually doing the shooting, but 2 police officers were involved in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. There's a couple videos that came out on this. I'm not going to play these over on the podcast because they are disturbing, and I don't want to watch it. But if you want to, it's on YouTube. You can even go to this story on Business Insider, and it's right here. You can play it, you can watch it. There's 2 angles. As far as I know, there's not an angle that shows the shooting itself, the actual gunshots, but you can hear them off screen. You can see some struggle happening leading up to the shots, but you don't actually see the shots. You hear them. You hear some threats from the officers prior. Basically, what happened was somebody called the police saying that there was a man outside this store threatening people with a gun. The police arrived, assumed that it was this gentleman, even though there's conflicting stories about that now. The store owner basically said that this guy was around all the time. He was known as the CD man. He was well known in the neighborhood. Anyway, the police showed up. He was actually tasered twice prior to this, prior to being shot. He was tackled by the police kind of up against the hood of the car, fell over onto the ground, then was pinned by both officers. There was a little bit of a struggle. It's unclear whether or not he was trying to get up because he couldn't breathe. He was, after all, being held to the ground by two rather large police officers. And as you can see, he was a pretty large man himself. So it may have taken two officers to hold him down. Either way. One of the officers said, in the audio you can almost hear, he says, "If you fucking move, I swear to God." Then one of the officers fires 2 shots into Sterling's chest. Seconds later, at least 3 more shots can be heard. Afterwards, one of the officers appeared to remove something from Sterling's right pants pocket. Police haven't confirmed if it was a weapon. That was the assumption was that he was carrying a weapon, and that's why the police felt that they should take this action. Rather than tase him or pepper spray him or incapacitate him in some other way, violence was used. And he was shot, killed. If you watch the video, it's very disturbing. The autopsy revealed that he had gunshot wounds to the chest and back. Obviously, that's probably because when he was being shot, he was rolling around, and the officer was discharging his weapon several times. So he died on the ground there. Obviously, he was shot in the torso several times, which is... it's very rare that you're going to survive that. So there was a huge outcry against this, and you can see why. I mean, if you watch the video, and actually, hell, why not? I mean, it is disturbing, but I think it's important for all of us to watch. Let's see if we can... Okay. Yeah. It's not a very high quality. It's very small on the screen. I'm pretty sure you can't hear the audio. Yeah, here, let me see if I can replay this and see if we can get the audio. This is currently coming through my headphones. Sorry that this is a very small screen, but I didn't pull it up on YouTube beforehand, and I don't want to subject you. Yeah, so you hear 2 shots. And when you turn back, you see that this police officer is holding his weapon, obviously pointing at him. Fired shots even after he was clearly incapacitated. Yeah, the whole thing is very disturbing. I don't know what to say about this. Obviously, I think it was an excessive use of force. And the response, to be honest with you, has been really saddening to me. This man had a family. He did have a criminal record, and that is valid to bring up. He did have a criminal record. However, there have been people who I've seen on my own Facebook feed who have brought up his criminal record as a justification, as in, like, he had it coming, he deserved it, which is absolute horseshit. None of the crimes that he was convicted of, I mean, yes... He was convicted of illegally carrying a weapon. There was some possibility of him being a sex offender. He was convicted of having carnal knowledge of a minor. We don't know if it was consensual or not. Maybe he was, 18 and they were 16. I mean, it happens all the time. But, regardless of his criminal past, none of the crimes that he was convicted of or served time for were crimes that carried a death sentence. In this case, the police were judge, jury, and executioner. Police are saying, or the official story, or people who are defending the police are saying that he was reaching for a weapon. We don't know if he had a weapon on him. Something was removed from his pocket, but the police have not confirmed what that is or not. But it's just, either way, I mean, this is a very sad situation. But the response to bring up his criminal record and then to imply somehow that he deserved this is appalling. It really is. And it shows the lack of people's ability to not only support police, but then also to support police brutality victims. Supporting Alton Sterling and saying that the police acted wrongly in shooting him does not make you anti-police at all. It makes you anti-police violence. Obviously, police are put in positions like this all the time where they have to make split-second decisions. Some of them are more clear-cut than this, obviously, where they're pulled on, a weapon is pulled on them and they have a split second to decide what to do. Obviously, in that case, violent responses are often necessary, but in this case, it's hard to justify this. He was pinned to the ground. You could see his arms were at his sides. From what it looked like, he was maybe trying to get up for air because, I mean, he had two grown men on his chest, and this resulted in him being shot. This is a little less clear-cut than the next story we're going to talk about, but it goes to show that, and I firmly believe that in cases like this, it should not be the automatic response to give the benefit of the doubt to the police officers. And I will get a lot of flack for that. If I said that to any of my friends or family, I would get flack for it because it makes it sound as though I'm not supporting the officers, and that's not true at all. I support officers. I believe that they should be respected. I believe that if you follow the law, you probably shouldn't have any more run-ins with the police than you'd expect. They certainly shouldn't be deadly. You never know. I mean, this man was probably acting irrationally because he had already been tased twice, but we don't know. But the reason I say that we probably shouldn't give, blanket authorization to police and just accept what they do as true and say, or as right, and say, well, they had to make a split-second decision. I'm always going to side with the police over whoever because they had a criminal record or they were disobeying the law and they had it coming. Well, I find that very hard to swallow because many of these people who argue that are conservatives. They are deeply authoritarian already, and they are paranoid and scared of what they call police state. They don't want a liberal government to come in and have a police state that runs every aspect of our lives. But honestly, the first steps towards a police state are not holding the actual police accountable. The problem is not police in general. Okay, it's not. I mean, they are there to keep the peace. They're there to enforce the laws, and it's a very difficult job. I understand that, and I appreciate it. I appreciate what the officers do for us every day. I know that most police officers are probably not bad people, right? I mean, that would just be ridiculous to classify an entire group of people based on the actions of a few irresponsible people or a few finicky or fidgety people who are trigger happy, right? But the minute that we automatically give the benefit of the doubt to the authority figure is the minute that we are okay with a police state. We are okay with authoritarianism, to be honest with you. The scrutiny should always be on those in authority. Always. Police officers should be held to a higher standard. They should be held to the same standards as everybody else. If I walk down the street, right, and I got into a similar altercation, and I was pinning some guy down on the road with a buddy of mine, and the guy was trying to get up, and I saw him reaching for his pocket, and I shot him in the chest 6 times, I would be brought to court. I would be brought up on charges or investigated, and if I was convicted of manslaughter or murder, then I would serve that term. But too often, police officers skate on these sorts of things. They get to a jury trial, and inevitably, usually the juries don't find any guilt with the officers. That is sort of like being above the law. I mean, you need to have the same standards for officers, because then there's no motivation or there's no incentive to make sure that you are following the law and following the rules and being within your rightful authority. And if you're not, if you're not punished for that, then that leads to police overreaching their bounds. That leads to police becoming drunk with their own power. That leads to an authoritarian police state. We need to hold the officers accountable, and it's very easy to see in cases like this where, why not pepper spray him if he's really trying to get up, incapacitate him in other ways? You already had tased him twice. Like, put cuffs on him. Who even knows what you could do? If you're really worried about it, bring him in just in case as a precaution. It doesn't need to get to this point. Police need to be trained in de-escalation tactics. They need to, their first instinct should be to de-escalate the situation and stop this from happening and stop it from escalating to the situation, resorting to physical force as a last resort and not being so quick to do it. And I was reading an article on several, and I don't want to necessarily pull this to race, but there were several instances of white people who pulled guns on cops, and the cops were able to peacefully de-escalate the situation, and nobody got shot, nobody was wounded, even though these people were discharging weapons. They were pointing their guns at police. Situations in which it's hard to imagine that if this man were to be doing that, he would get out of that situation alive. This is part of a rash of police violence against specifically black men, and it's disproportionate. People will say, well, it's a lower percentage of people who get killed by the police are black, but if you look at the actual population densities in those areas, you're actually, I think the figures were, and don't quote me on this, but I think it was you're 3.5 times more likely to be shot by police if you're black than if you're white, just based on population density, and the percentage of the population that are black in those areas. So it's disconcerting, obviously, and there needs to be more accountability with police. There needs to be retraining. There needs to be demilitarization of police. I mean, honestly, seriously, in other countries, most cops don't actually even carry guns in most other civilized countries. And this gets into a whole different conversation of gun control, which we won't get into right now. But in other countries that have decent, intelligent gun laws, you don't have traffic stops where cops get shot because guns just are not that common. They're not easy to get. Criminals don't really get them very easily. You don't see cops getting shot at routine traffic stops because it's just not something that happens. Gun violence is just not something that happens. It's a shame that we let it get to this point in this country, and it's a shame that this disproportionately affects black people because then it does become a race issue. And if you don't believe it in this sense, let's look at this next story I have. Okay, so this man, Philando Castile. Now, this is a little bit of a controversial title. The Minnesota governor says he would be alive if he were white. Anyway, this guy worked at a school. He was beloved by all the children, I guess, there at the school. You know them by name. He had been stopped, I think I read in a different story, 52 times. I don't know if he had a criminal record. But anyway, he was traffic stop. He was stopped because the taillight in his car was out. And he was a licensed gun carrier. Licensed. So completely legally owned his gun. He passed all of his tests that he would have needed to own a gun, and he owned one. He disclosed that to the police during the traffic stop and said that he just wanted to let them know that. He reached for his ID, and apparently the police officer was fidgety or panicky, and he shot him when he was reaching for his ID several times. His fiance, who was in the car with him, said that he was actually shot 5 times as he sat at the steering wheel reaching into his back pocket for his ID. So he disclosed, as you should, when you go to I actually have my license to carry, and when you go through the training course for the license to carry, they do tell you if you're stopped by police and you are carrying a gun, you should disclose that to the officer. The first thing you should say that you are a licensed gun carrier, and you're just going to let them know that you do have a weapon on you, but you are licensed, and that you can reach for your ID in your pocket and say, is it okay if I show you my ID? Well, apparently, I guess the officer may have taken it as a threat and shot him, and he died. This is inexcusable. He was clearly going out of his way to disclose that he had a weapon. He was clearly trying to act within the law and be respectful to the police officer by offering to show him his ID, and then he got shot. Now, the facts are still a little fuzzy on this because we have, the account that we have of the situation is his fiance. She did stream a video on Facebook Live of her fiance basically dying in the car. But this is even more cut and dried and black and white than the and excuse my use of black and white there, but even more so than the previous story, because this man didn't, not that I know of, have a criminal record, and in a routine traffic stop where he's going out of his way to identify himself as a gun owner and make the police officer more comfortable in the situation, he gets shot and killed. By all accounts, he was a great man, great guy. The school he worked at, everybody loved him. And now he's dead. Routine traffic stop for a broken taillight. Now, this is clearly a case of an officer who's panicky, who's too quick to pull the trigger. And it's sad. It's a tragedy. Now, in response to these two killings, to these two killings by police officers of Philando Castile and Alton Sterling, we had mass protests across the country. Many people came out denouncing the violence. The Minnesota governor, who's a white man, said that he doubts that Philando Castile would be dead if he were white. He'd still be alive. No word yet from the Second Amendment crowd and the NRA as to a card-carrying legal gun owner being shot by the police, even though he was peacefully trying to comply with the law. There's no statement there. One would wonder if there would have been a statement if he were white. But that kind of puts you in a interesting situation if you're conservative, because your natural inclination is to trust the police and to back up the police officers. But then if it's a white man and you feel compelled to defend them because they were a card-carrying gun owner, legal gun owner, you have to decide which narrative you want to support more. So that's probably why we don't see a lot of outcry from the conservative side on this. And yes, to be fair, I will say that I haven't heard any conservatives that I know of say that he deserved to die. I've heard a lot of people say that Alton Sterling deserved to die because of his criminal record. But what people don't realize there is that just because you have a criminal record does not mean that we get rid of due process. The police cannot be judge, jury, and executioner, as they were in both these cases. In both these cases, they were judge, jury, and executioner. And in both these cases, they were incorrect. So this gave rise to massive protests around the country. There was a large protest in Dallas. And then this is where the story gets even more horrific. So there was a mass protest in Dallas. The police were there protecting and patrolling, making sure that everything was being done peacefully. And these were peaceful protests. They weren't destroying property. They weren't looting. They weren't doing anything. It was a peaceful protest in Dallas. And then this suspect, I think his name is Micah Johnson, who is a reservist. He served in Afghanistan. He, was sympathetic to the Black Power movement, or Black Panther movement, I should say. He was not in the Black Lives Matter movement, I don't think. I don't think he had connections with Black Lives Matter. But he went on a sniper spree and shot 12 officers, targeting white officers, and out of those 12 that were shot, 5 died. 5 police officers killed by one sniper. The most deadly day for police in one day since 9/11. The the police actually killed the shooter with a remote bomb that was detonated by a robot, which is interesting. I think it's the first time that that's been done. So there's been a lot of interesting responses to this, where people are starting to blame the entire Black Lives Matter group for this, which is I've mentioned before, ridiculous. You can't blame one group, an entire group of people, for what just a few people have done. This applies to Muslims. You can't, blame all Muslims for what extremist Muslims do. You can't blame all Black Lives Matter people for what a small, tiny percentage of Black Lives Matter protesters do. Similarly, you can't then blame all police officers for the violence and actions of a few. All of these groups don't want to be treated as, they don't want all their individuals to be treated as one group, as in, just collective punishment, but they're more than willing to apply that collective punishment to other groups. So many people that I've seen who are in solidarity only with the police officers view Black Lives Matter, the Black Lives Matter movement, as detrimental and the source of all this racial hatred, and these very few people who are being violent towards police, who are motivated by Black Lives Matter. That is then defining the entire Black Lives Matter movement, whereas the extremists who are shooting and killing police officers are defining all police by the actions of a few police officers, even though these police are out there defending and protecting, in this case, the Black Lives Matter protesters. Okay, so you're painting an entire group, in both cases, you're painting an entire group for the actions of a few, and you're punishing a group for the actions of a few, which is immoral, it's wrong, and it undermines the moral high ground that, any moral high ground that you may have held. We see this all the time. We see it in Islam. We see it, in anti-Semitism. We see it at any time that one group is demonized and ostracized and punished and, targeted because of the actions of a few, or because of the traits of a few members of that group. It's universally wrong. It's you cannot have the moral high ground if you hold that position. You just can't. And this is why this is so sad, because now it's going to be a never-ending circle of never-ending cycle, I should say, of violence. Now, police are going to be even more nervous and fidgety in the line of duty, which is going to inevitably lead to more violence, more police violence, which is then going to lead to more protests and more extreme actions in retaliation, which is then going to lead to even more fidgetiness and nervousness on the part of police officers, and it's gonna devolve into this vortex of violence, and it's just gonna get worse and worse and worse. And somewhere along the line, we need to stop and back it up and realize that the only way to get through this, right, is through positive change and reinforcement. And this is something I wanted to get to. When people are talking about collective punishment and talking about the Black Lives Matter movement and saying that they're all wrong and they're all cop killers, and all of these blanket statements about groups of people, most of these people don't realize that Black Lives Matter, and I'm gonna pull this up just so you know. I don't know if a lot of people know this. Let's see if I can get it. There we go. Black Lives Matter actually has a whole slew of actual policy positions. It's not just a hashtag. They have a ton of policy positions that are sensible and that are inclusive, and that will actually benefit more than just black people. Benefit all minorities, and even white people. So here it is on their actual website. These are their different policy positions, their different objectives, and then there's an excellent article here on the Washington Post that sort of goes into some of the things that they support. And this is just goes to show that this sniper is not representative of the founders and the mainstream of the Black Lives Matter movement. So, yeah, so here's the Washington Post article. The Black Lives Matter policy agenda is practical, thoughtful, and urgent. So here's just a few things. So, end broken window policing. This is a call to retire the philosophy of policing that leads to mass arrests for low-level offenses such as loitering, drinking in public, or transients. So that's good. That's good. It reduces the level of people who, get criminal records for nothing. And policing for profit. That should go without saying. Limit use of force. Demilitarization. That's a huge one. I mean, our police should not be militarized. Why are our police using military surplus gear? It just does not make sense. They're not the military. They're the police. They're there to protect people. Body cams, no, that just makes sense. Training, so training in de-escalation, sensitivity training, social and socioeconomic training, community oversight. So this is a huge one. This is one that I agree with massively, that you have a citizen-driven community oversight program that actually oversees police, and there are civilian review boards that would, review police actions. This is just common sense. I mean, your community is policing the police of the community, so it's holding them accountable in ways that we don't really see now. Community representation, fair police contracts, independent investigation and prosecutions, huge. And so you see, like, these aren't irrational positions. These are good, reasonable policy positions that should be put into place. It's never, ever, ever, ever a bad idea to put checks and balances on power. It's never a bad idea to question authority. It's never a bad idea to hold authority to a higher standard. Ever. If we want violence to end, okay, it needs to start somewhere. And yes, this violence against the police is horrific. I'm not saying that it's justified at all. It's not. These police officers that were shot were innocent. And actually, it's sad that this happened in Dallas, because Dallas is actually on the forefront of training police in de-escalation tactics. They actually were one of the pioneers of this. Their police station is actually rated as one of the best in the nation as far as low occurrences of police violence. They have a great rapport with the community there in Dallas. They're rated very highly. And it's just a shame that this happened to the Dallas police force, because they're one of the exemplars in the nation. But that to be for more oversight and for better training and for accountability for those in authority and police officers is not to be inherently against police officers. It's the exact opposite. I'm being more for police because I want accountability so that needless police brutality stops. Yes, police are in the line of duty every day. Sometimes it's going to happen. Things are going to happen where violence is necessary. And I don't think that when there are legitimate actions of violence in the line of duty, while they are regrettable that it has to come to that, those legitimate instances are okay, and we can accept that because they are trying to keep the peace. They are trying to police the neighborhoods. However, the unacceptable thing where the violence that we've seen with Alton Sterling and with Philando Castile, these instances are not acceptable. They need to stop, right? And the best way to do that is retraining, is demilitarization, is community oversight, is holding the criminal actions of police responsible and not just accepting it as some authoritarian ideal, not just, constantly always giving the police the benefit of the doubt in every instance and constantly setting them up as perfect, above the law. Whatever they do is okay because they have to make these split second decisions. So all in all, everything that's happened this week has just been horrible from every angle. From Black Lives Matter to the innocent 2 men that were killed to the police that were killed. It's just horrible, and it has to stop, and it has to start somewhere. And the best way to do that, I think, is to sort of maybe even rethink the way that that police are operating, retraining, starting from the top down. So there's that. That's my episode. Again, stay tuned for the Reason Roundup. That will be coming up soon. I'm hoping to record that tonight and get it up. I'm gonna put a little thing out on Twitter that I'm switching from solely audio to a screen recording format, and I'm also gonna try to put some audio together to put on my shout engine to alert my audience there, because they probably won't see me on Twitter. But until next time, and next episode, I'm sure will be a little bit more ranging in topics, like my normal podcasts usually are. But like I said, tonight I thought that this topic needed an episode to itself. So that's it for me, the Agnosticator. I'm signing off, and I will see you probably Wednesday.